Thanks for joining us on a special year-end edition of the Week in Review. I'm Paris Schutz. Shocking upsets, corruption convictions, and an escalating crisis surrounding the arrival and housing of asylum-seeking migrants. Tonight, we look back at 2023.
We can build a better, stronger, safer Chicago. We just have to look deep into the soul of Chicago. Can I get a witness?
Brandon Johnson takes the reins as Chicago's 57th mayor, capping an unlikely and historic rise, backed by the powerful Chicago Teachers Union. Johnson narrowly defeats former schools chief Paul Vallis in a runoff and ends a tumultuous first and only term for Lori Lightfoot, marked by the COVID-19 pandemic.
Let's continue to keep our city great.
With Johnson comes consensus pick for new police superintendent Larry Snelling, who vows to toe the line between police reform and police support.
We will never close our doors to those who come here in search of a better life.
Johnson immediately confronts Chicago's escalating migrant crisis, with thousands of asylum seekers being sent to Chicago from the border.
This is our backyard, so now you have taken our backyard.
Communities protest against temporary migrant shelters, police stations get overrun, and a botched attempt to build a tent encampment leaves allies and foes questioning the administration's ability to humanely handle the situation. The crisis comes as Chicago lands this summer's Democratic National Convention for the first time since 1996. Governor Pritzker is intent on showcasing this city and his own role as a national Democratic power player.
This case was about bribery and extortion occurring at the highest levels of Chicago city government.
2023 was also the year two historic and powerful political reigns came to a corrupt end. 50-year alderman Ed Burke, who lorded over the powerful finance committee and always operated one step ahead of the feds, convicted in historic racketeering case where he was found to have traded city approvals for attempts to get business for his private law practice. Former top ComEd officials and Mike Madigan-connected lobbyists also taken down in massive federal bribery case that serves as a prelude for the former powerful Illinois House Speaker's own alleged bribery trial. After myriad court challenges, the controversial Illinois no-cash bail law finally takes effect without any immediate apparent impact on public safety. Meanwhile, challengers line up to replace Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx, stepping down after this term. And state lawmakers can't agree on whether Chicago should move to a fully elected school board this year or down the road. In sports, NASCAR shuts Michigan Avenue down for its soggy, historic first-ever city race in Chicago. Northwestern University rocked by a sexual abuse and hazing scandal that ends the career of longtime head coach Pat Fitzgerald. The Bears finish another lackluster year with big questions at quarterback and head coach. More blahs on the north and south side as Jerry Reinsdorf cleans house at the top of the White Sox, and Blackhawks phenom Connor Bedard provides a spark of excitement as fans can only hope for 2024 to bring better results all across Chicago's sports landscape.
It can only get better on that front, I think. And to our Week in Review panel now, joining us are Chief Political Reporter at the Chicago Tribune, Rick Pearson, Laura Washington, political analyst for ABC7 and a columnist for the Chicago Tribune, our own Heather Sharon, and Robert Scoop Jackson, sports reporter and columnist at the Chicago Sun-Times. I'm hoping we can get into all of this a year in about 26 minutes. So Scoop Jackson, 1.5 year or more into Brandon Johnson's term as mayor, is Chicago safer, better, stronger?
None of the above. But I think you're getting somebody in the office who hasn't had experience in doing anything this big and at this magnitude, and it's a slow process. We've said this before, it's a slow process. We want to happen, we want things to happen more quicker from him and his administration, but the time he had to put administration together, the things that they're doing, and the fact that a lot of them don't have any experience, it seems from what I've been hearing also that a lot of people in place don't know what to do right now, and they're kind of just figuring out as they go along, and this is the wrong city to try to figure this out in.
And especially on the migrant crisis, which we'll get to in a minute. Heather Sharon, backed mostly by the very powerful Chicago Teachers Union, I would say probably the most powerful political organization in Illinois right now. They're at the height of their power. Are they using it wisely, or is it a case of be careful what you wish for right now?
Well, it is very much a work in progress, and I don't think that anybody anticipated back in May that we would see the migrant crisis escalate the way that we have. We've seen two major waves. We appear to be in the middle of another one in the middle of winter, which is significantly unusual, and it's hard to judge what Brandon Johnson would have done if he had not had a full-blown humanitarian crisis on his hands. He will be judged on how he ultimately handles this crisis. That is very much a work in progress, which isn't to say that he hasn't had accomplishments in his first 7 or 8 months in office. He got his budget through. He is going to ask voters in March to hike the real estate transfer tax to create a dedicated fund for homelessness services. And those are accomplishments that other mayors sort of made half-hearted attempts for. So far, he has done those things, but he has just a massive amount on his to-do list for 2024.
Certainly he has had a command of city council on those things that Heather mentioned, Laura Washington, but does this migrant crisis threaten to maybe lose his grip as some of his allies are questioning the administration's ability to handle this and his competence?
Doesn't that sound familiar? Lori Lightfoot, during her term, had many of her allies very unhappy with her. The migrant crisis reminds me a lot of the pandemic. Two very different events, two very different times, but issues and challenges that these mayors, Lori Lightfoot and Brandon Johnson, could not anticipate, and in many ways that we're never going to be prepared for, no matter how experienced they are. And the question is the migrant crisis going to do to Johnson what the pandemic did to Lori Lightfoot? Lori Lightfoot made a lot of mistakes. She wasn't the perfect mayor, but the pandemic, I think, really undermined her to the point where she couldn't pull through her agenda and make the difference and make the impact she wanted to see in this city, because she was so overwhelmed. The migrants and also the violence that came out of the George Floyd debacle. So there was a lot on the table that she had to handle that I think that undermined her agenda.
The crisis defines leadership.
Sure.
And
but there's crises. These are some pretty big crises.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they happen very early. Keep in mind, both of them happen very early in their tenure. Yes.
But I do get the feeling. I mean, when you see the issue moving to the migrant issue about, the encampment that we're going to build this thing, and now the toxic waste site, and why did that progress as far as it did?
Well, this is where the experience comes in, because
he
doesn't have a plan. It's like he's bouncing from
and that's one of the problems. I mean, when he talks, you don't get any specifics. It's a 7-layer word salad of generalities. When you ask for specifics, there aren't any. And frankly, I think you can accommodate, because we all know he had no previous big governmental experience. You can say, I'm still trying to work this through. And be honest.
But he won't say that.
No, he'll never say that. And he's not surrounded people with that type of experience.
What about Tony Preckwinkle, Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle, who is supposed to be mentoring him? And I'm wondering what those conversations are like.
A whole ton from her on the credit. I mean, they have offered their fiscal help,
right?
On some front, also, offering Cook County Health as a screening center for migrants to get health checkups. But I have to agree with you, Rick Pearson. It seems like each successive mayor, their communication strategy. Rahm was pretty vague. Then Lori Lightfoot, even more so. Brandon Johnson, we've interviewed him a few times. It's hard to get anything but platitudes out of him.
Well, right. He knows a lot of words, but he doesn't answer the question.
What about the fact that, Heather, he has, folks came in and said, is he going to have this very far left progressive mandate? Made some choices, like Larry Snelling as the police chief that the FOP was in favor of. His chief of staff is a daily holdover. So some perhaps centrist tendencies.
Oh, for sure. If you expected Brandon Johnson to take office and blow up the system, that is not what he has done. And there is a good bit of frustration among the progressive groups that fueled his rise that he has not done that. The Chicago police budget is going to reach $2 billion in 2024. That is nearly a third of all of the city's discretionary fund. That is a massive amount of money going toward locking people up, which is anathema to sort of what he talked about on the campaign trail and what people sort of saw in him as a mayoral candidate. On the other hand, as we all know, if you're the mayor of Chicago, you hold the jacket for crime and violence. And I imagine that as we all sort of get back up, in 2024, we're going to hear a lot about the 13% drop in homicides. We're going to hear less about the increase in robberies and carjackings, although carjackings are down sort of from last year. So he has a very, very difficult high wire to act, and he would tell you that he can't have gotten all of it done in the first 8 months. The question is can he manage the migrant crisis and still make good on his promises? That is ultimately what did Lori Lightfoot in.
But on crime, at his inauguration, we don't have time to waste.
Right.
Those are his words.
Absolutely.
Well, 13% drop. I mean, that's not insignificant. It's still higher than before COVID.
True, but perception
on murders,
is reality. Unfortunately, in politics, that's the case.
Although, folks are upset.
And this is going nationwide.
Folks in the center, more on the right, are upset that he doesn't more forcefully condemn some of these group actions that take place in the Loop and vandalism and things like that.
One of the other thing that people are unhappy about is, beyond the burden that the migrants have placed on the city, is the fact that there are people here in need who feel that they're not getting the attention, that they're not getting the resources because of the migrant crisis. And this has become a racial issue, but a divide between African American communities and Latino communities. But there are other neighborhoods too that are feeling the brunt of it. And it's ironic because one of his major themes in his inauguration speech is that he was going to bring the city together. He understood there had been a lot of fissures during the campaign. And again, perhaps not through any fault of his own, the city is not together. It's less unified than it was when he came into office.
Not only is the city not together, the city and the state's not together. Talk about this public divide between Pritzker and Johnson on especially that tent encampment. I don't recall a time where a mayor and a governor were publicly trading criticisms in the media to each other.
That to me was a high profile pull the rug out from the mayor by the governor. But it also shows, I think, the level of what they believe the competency is of the city right now, is that the state had to step in and
no doubt
do
the
this.
DNC in August plays a role in that. The governor, this is his big show.
That's right. And yes, the mayor, of course, wears the jacket for the city, but the DNC is a national event. This is Pritzker's big party as he tries to escalate his footprint nationwide as a political player. And if there's bad things that happen at the DNC, yeah, the mayor will get some of the heat, but this will be on Pritzker.
But you can assume that Republicans want some bad things to happen,
well,
a.k.a. sending more buses of migrants to the city around that time.
Right, they want to create chaos, and they're going to continue. You haven't seen nothing yet in terms of the flow of migrants that are going to be coming to the city and the challenges, because they want to see chaos. They want to see the city falling apart by the time the Democratic National Convention gets here. And Pritzker's, he's got a real challenge because you're right. He's not the mayor. He doesn't run the city, but he's going to have to wear the jacket. And I think right now he's got to be really worried about this mayor, given how he's handled the migrant crisis and other issues so far, whether or not he's going to be up to making sure that this convention goes smoothly.
Heather, how do you think this resolves in 2024? Where are the temporary shelters going to be? Will there be more police stations overrun?
Well, so the big issue is, can Brandon Johnson, working with the state and working with the county, get enough people out of city shelters so that the people who are sent here in the coming months have somewhere to go, and then can they get transitioned into more permanent housing? And that is why you saw, in October, the mayor step on his own sort of budget adoption and announce that there was going to be a 60-day limit on stays for migrants in city shelters. So we will see the first sort of eviction deadline come in the first weeks of 2024. And whether the city is actually going to put people out on the street, I think, is very much an open question. And if they do, what happens to those people? Do they fall victim to crime? Do they fall victim to disease? Is there more suffering that the people of Chicago are sort of forced to confront?
Speaking of suffering, we're looking at that Pilsen migrant shelter where a young boy died, where the conditions have reportedly been deplorable. I mean, some of these shelters are dangerous places to be.
Yeah, so I think the mayor still sees that these sort of, massive base camps is sort of his best shot at sort of creating a large enough space to house people in what he will call more dignified conditions. However, we know that the land at 115th and Halsted, which was the other picked location for a base camp, also has environmental concerns. There has to be a whole phase 2 environmental study of that land. That is very much an open question. The fact of the matter is that it doesn't appear that there is federal help coming anytime soon. So despite, you know, the mayor sort of joining forces with New York's Eric Adams and the Denver mayor sort of saying, please help us, none of that help is coming because, oh yeah, it's a presidential election year in 2024 too. So the mayor is going to have to figure this out. And the fact that relations are so bad with the governor adds another level of difficulty that will only, I think, in the end, make it more difficult to take care of the people who are coming here, seeking help, seeking to become Chicagoans, and are simply hoping to live a little bit of a better life.
All right, well, Ed Burke certainly lived a good life for a long time, 50-year alderman, chairman of the powerful Finance Committee. He was always a step or two ahead of the feds because everyone kind of knew vaguely what he was doing, the way he operated. They finally got him. Where does this conviction rank in the annals of political corruption in Illinois?
That's a great question. What is he? He's number 38 from city council since 1968. So if we start ranking him right now, I don't want to be prisoner of the moment, but it probably maybe top 5. It depends on what the sentencing happens when it comes down and how that's cast upon him. But it's part with the core. We've known, and those who from the outside looking at politics and not in it like you all are, even on the outside, we knew how Burke was rolling. You know, so to see him get caught and finally given his comeuppance, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays itself out. But ranking, I don't know, man. He has a lot of people ahead of him that have done, I don't want to say a lot worse, but, you know, come on.
This is the thing we've said on this. So these particular crimes were kind of petty ante compared to what he might have been doing for 50 years.
That's the point. The man
this is just what they caught him on.
The man was in office for 54 years, record-breaking period of time in office. If he's not number one, and he should be given his tenure, given the amount of power he had. So one wonders, what did they not get him on? And we'll never know, but the man had a lot of power. He clearly didn't have any problem abusing it. So the question is, what other bodies are buried, and if there's more that's out there, maybe we won't get Ed Burke on some things, but maybe there are other people out there that have relationships that are going to come to the fore in future investigations.
And the ComEd for Rick Pearson, the ComEd bribery scheme, how about the significance of that conviction this year?
I think it's very significant because that's kind of sets the table for the prosecution of Michael Madigan. And if you remember, this was ComEd acknowledging and paying a $200 million fine that they purposely worked to do favors for Mike Madigan. And they did it through these to win Madigan's support, Madigan's favor. And now we're going to see, because we have this issue now going to the Supreme Court over the bribery statute. And do you have to
explain that again, though, for the viewers?
It's a case out of the former mayor of Portage, Indiana, and it's a question of, is there an explicit quid pro quo to be a bribery charge, rather than, you know, this was involved campaign money that went into, and all of a sudden this contractor got all of these big deals. Is that an explicit quid pro quo? There are various courts of appeals. The 7th U.S., which is us, has said there is no difference. Other courts of appeals have said there is a difference between a gratuity and an explicit quid pro quo.
So the Madigan lawyer is obviously delaying until that ruling comes.
And the sentencing for the ComEd 4 also is being delayed because of that.
It seems like with the ComEd 4 for so long of this, the feds really wanted to squeeze them, to flip, to get more on Madigan.
Right.
And yet they stuck to their guns all the way, including potentially going to jail.
True. And of course, the top one of that is Mike McLean, who's also not only convicted in the ComEd 4, but he's also a co-defendant with Mike Madigan in that case as well. And that's one where McLean made it very easy. I mean, he was his consigliere, and it made it very clear that he was not going to spill.
Well, assuming that this case goes forward, it would seem to me that Madigan would be in the same kind of a jam that Ed Burke was in the sense that there are tapes, there are recordings, that it's not just, you know, he said, she said,
right.
and I believe that's one reason why Burke was so easily convicted. I mean, are the tapes going to be the crux of this case as well?
I think absolutely.
Danny Solis.
Yes.
Well, and I was going to say the feds now can point to the fact that a federal jury has found Danny Solis's at least a credible witness and someone that they felt comfortable sort of using evidence that he gathered to convict somebody. Michael Madigan's lawyers were in the courtroom for key moments during the Burke trial. I have no doubt that they were taking notes on sort of how Danny Solis handled himself on the stand. He was unshakable. I mean, Chris Gare, Burke's defense attorney, gave him the both barrels, and he was very calm. He was very matter of fact, and that, I think, has got to give Michael Madigan's folks a little bit of New Year's jitters.
And one other thing, too, and Scoop made the point, is people who aren't political, they knew with Burke.
Yeah.
That's the jury.
Yeah.
People ask me, is Burke going to get convicted? I said, people know Burke.
Right.
Now you got Madigan coming.
Well, here's the deal. He had 2 jury people mention his name after the trial for the Common Core. So they already have Madigan in their mind, and they're putting it out there in public.
And they wanted to send a message.
They wanted to send a message, exactly.
Very quickly before we get to sports, the no cash bail law, it finally went into effect after a Supreme Court upheld it. Opponents were saying it would put more criminals on the streets, endanger communities. Has it?
It has not. There is no purge. This is not a purge law. There was no sort of rampant criminality or anything like that. I think what we have seen was that this law was designed to correct systemic injustices that fell hardest on the poorest Illinoisans, primarily Black and Latino, who found themselves held in jail on charges that other people were not being held on because they could put up bail. And I think that it should prompt a reckoning, especially among the Illinois Republican Party, who sort of blasted this law. Whether they will have that reckoning, I think.
I was going to say, Heather, are you saying all those phony newspapers in the last election were wrong?
Yes, I know, shocking, shocking.
Can you imagine
Please
that?
hold it together, Rick. We've only got a couple
All
of
right,
minutes.
tell us how you really think. We'll do that at the Billy Goat later. All right, Scoop. In sports, NASCAR. Good thing it's coming back next year.
Well, $109 million, nobody's going to turn down. And that's what it generated. So, and the interest, as far as impact was concerned, as they said, was comparable to the 2020 All-Star game. And that was a big deal, NBA All-Star game here. So I can't see why it wouldn't. Money and impact kind of roll in this city. And anytime you can put the two together, I think you're going to see something consistent with it, especially if they can hold off the rain.
Right.
They want it, if it doesn't rain and that $109 million goes to $200 million, you're going to see it longer than next year and the year after that and the year after that.
All right, Northwestern, Pat Fitzgerald, is he going to get a big settlement out of them for that firing over the hazing scandal?
It's going to be interesting to see if Northwestern really wants to take this to trial and just pay him off, because they still have another lawsuit that's possibly coming from 50 students. So what are they going to do as a university? Because having both of them happen to them at the same time, I think they're probably going to settle one and try to fight the other in court. I don't know which one is going to be which, but $130 million, if they can say, hey, let's settle for 100, he may take it.
But if they settle, isn't that create the perception of guilt, and isn't that going to hurt them in the other case?
But it could be worse if it goes to trial and they find the university guilty, and then they come back with another trial from the students, from the 50 or however many students come up, and they're found guilty of that. So it's almost like they can't win.
Yeah. All right, the Bears can't really win enough to make the playoffs this year.
Right.
We don't think. Next year, are we looking at a rookie quarterback, Drake May or Caleb Williams?
I think the Bears are in a situation where they have to draft a quarterback because they passed on getting a quarterback last year when they had the #1 pick. And if they fall into the same situation, they can't pass twice on a quarterback when they're not sold, or the city is not sold on Justin Fields right now. So they have to take a chance. And it's going to be interesting to see not just for quarterback, or who's going to be around to coach that quarterback. That's the other part of the story.
Whether Eberflus comes back or Getsy on offense.
Getsy is the one that seems to be the one that they don't want to, I don't want to say they, let's say the city, that the city doesn't want to see have control over 2 quarterbacks and possibly ruin 2 quarterbacks.
All right, Connor Bedard, probably the best, brightest shining light in the city right now.
The #1 story of the year in Chicago. Connor Bedard.
Oh, well, that wasn't hard to do with what happened on South and North Side in baseball, and what's happening in basketball
I'm
and
talking
hockey.
the
I
#1
get
Chicago
it.
story.
Right.
More so than Migrants and Ed Burke.
The kid just put in 2 goals to beat Winnipeg, and I mean, it's just, it's our sports hope. It's our only.
That's all we got right now.
That's all we got, and he's so young. He's scoring and putting up points on a level that we haven't seen in a long time. And you have Wayne Gretzky co-signing on him. So when Wayne Gretzky says he's what was his words were? I think he's possibly better than anticipated. When that happens before midseason and Gretzky is giving you that honor, it's a good thing. He's like a one-man version of Tave and Kane replacing both of them. Yep, combined, exactly.
Next year in the wild card.
Next year in the wild card.
Next year in
All
the
right,
wild
that's
card.
something to look forward to in 2024.
Yes.
That is the only prediction we have time for because we are out of time. What a wonderful 2023 it's been, and what a wonderful show. Our thanks to Rick Pearson and Laura Washington, Heather Sharon, and Robert Scoop Jackson. And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
One note before we go, our longtime art director Linda Fox is retiring after nearly 24 years here at WTTW. Linda worked at a number of TV production houses as well as ABC7 and the WGN Morning News before coming here. At WTTW, she's worked on countless projects, including Chicago Tonight and the Week in Review, and has created the identity for our WTTW shows, series, channels, and more over her 2+ decades. Linda is creative and thoughtful, a wonderful partner and friend, and fortunately for us, she'll continue to share her talents on special projects at WTTW starting in the new year. But for now, Linda, thank you for everything, and our best wishes to you and your family. That is our show for this Friday night. Don't forget you can get Chicago Tonight and the Week in Review streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. And now for the Week in Review, I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you for watching. Have a wonderful new year, everybody. All right, before we go, fearless prediction for 2024.
I made mine.
Oh, you made yours. Laura.
It's going to be a wild and woolly political year next year in Chicago, and that's saying something for Chicago.
And nationally, too. We haven't even gotten to that,
Yeah.
Heather.
I mean, I think that the outcome of the Bring Chicago Home referendum is going to tell us a lot about whether Brandon Johnson will succeed as Chicago mayor.
What do we think about the 2024 presidential race? Is someone going to come up and upset Donald Trump in the Republican primary?
No.
No.
But can he get through the primary to the election without ending up in jail is the question.
Yeah.
He can still run.
He can, yeah.
And will he be reinstated in Maine and Colorado?
Well, that's those. If the Supreme, what happens with the Supreme Court? That's going to depend on the Supreme Court.
You think they'd take that case up?
Well, they're waiting for him to appeal.
Well, you're right. I think the Republican Party appealed
Colorado.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But they will.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, wishing all a happy and healthy holiday season.